General Somoza was not your idea of an ideal leader. So anyway, his classmate is with me, and he lives on a sort of a castle surrounded by a moat in Managua, Nicaragua. There's machine guns everywhere. They guard him everywhere. We walk past them all, probably because of his classmate. We knock on the door. He says, "Come in." We open the door, and he recognizes his classmate and says, "Hi." And he says to me, "Who in the hell are you?" And and he pulls out the gun, the drawer where he's got a gun. His classmate explains who we are. And then I explain, and he spoke perfectly good English, although I could speak Spanish. I explain our dilemma. They're going to take all the companies away. He gets on the phone, the speaker phone with us in his office, and gets the chairman of the Supreme Court. He said, "I have 2 Americans here, and I understand there's some goddamn provision in this law where you're going to take away their companies. I want it stopped immediately, or you're no longer Chief Justice of the Supreme Court." So we left there feeling pretty good, and we had hired a local lawyer to help us. Only the local lawyer was the son of somebody, and it was either in the Senate or on the Supreme Court. I got back to New York. I was a hero at AIG, and then the lawyer refused to implement it. We eventually got it turned around, but that's the sort of job I had for AIG for 12 years, beside the communication and the advertising. That was form of government relations. I mean, I didn't know insurance. I learned some, but that was a very exciting job.
That's great. Yeah, and then what happened after that until like now?
What happened after that is a headhunter got after me. I was dissatisfied because I didn't think I was getting certain kinds of compensation you should get at AIG, and Greenberg had a very strange policy. You could get something called SECO, Star International. Every year when you get your letter, here's your bonus, here's this, here's that. We've put aside so many shares of SECO in your account in Bermuda. A fellow who worked for me and stayed on and had some of my job, he probably had $20 million. However, the catch was, if you leave before you're 65, you forfeit it all. That was Greenberg's way to keep you. I knew I would not do this job because I was 65 years old. And sure enough, my friend, his name is Ned Clunan, and he's still a good friend. I don't know how many millions he had, and he was 60 at the time. He lost it all. I mean, he had been smart enough to sell stock and do other things, but he still, I mean, there were incredible fortunes here. Greenberg's worth $3 billion. He's one of the richest people in America. There were probably more billionaires and millionaires in AIG than any company on the street. But I was frustrated because I wasn't getting certain kinds of compensation. So I was approached by a headhunter about a similar job at Celanese. Have you ever heard of Celanese? They at the time made, they invented polyester, nothing I'm proud of, and they produced chemicals and other things. We go through the search. I ended up getting the job. They put me in an office right next to John McCumber, who's still alive, and he later became head of the Ex-Im Bank. He's now in Washington. This was so plush, you wouldn't believe. The Celanese building was in Midtown with a big C in front. You got there for breakfast, you sit in this office, the size of this living room, you called and you said, "I want my breakfast delivered," or "I'll come get it." Same thing for lunch, you did guests and so forth. Within a year, McCumber sold the company to Herx, to West Germany. It became Herx Celanese. I played, that's my son, he's home from Brown. I played an interesting role in this, in that once the sale was consummated, I became the spokesman because we had fired the head of communications. So then I sit before cameras with a great PR guy who's still a friend helping me, or I sit and took radio calls for 4 days. Why aren't you selling this great American company, so forth. But the news all came out terrific. And at the time, I hated it. They'd sold the company I had a great job at. It's the best thing that ever happened to me, because McCumber not only took care of the workers and the plants and all, he took the management committee, which I was on. I'd been there a little over a year, and had their pensions vested if they'd worked as if they'd worked there 20 years. And now I guess vested pensions basically don't exist, which makes me worry about my kids. I mean, I don't think you can save that much in an IRA. But once I was 55, I started getting this thing over. Since that time, I probably collected $1.5 million in pension. So I was there a year and a half, and I was looking for a job. And it'll lead to what I would advise kids today, which is not only change jobs if you have to, but that serendipity plays a big part in your life. So one day I was going to Washington on business. A fellow sitting next to me, I didn't even look at him until we got close, and I said, Don. His name was Don Ogilvy. He had my job previously at SAIS. He's the one that told him to hire me, and he was president of the American Bankers Association at this point. He said, Ron, you're not going to stay there with this stuff and go out to New Jersey where SAIS will be headquartered. You want out. He said, the New York City Partnership is looking for a president and CEO. I'll give you your name. That's when SAIS treated me the best, when I was down there for a meeting. The partnership was a powerful group. David Rockefeller was my first chairman, and we went from there with the CEOs. It was a group established by Rockefeller to help New York during the recession, but also to represent American business. So I did that for almost 7 years. I was on TV constantly, radio constantly, national shows. We took the mayor, who was in David Dinkins, to Japan. We took another delegation with Dinkins and about 12 CEOs to Europe. It was a fun job. It's a great job. But, everything runs its course. So I left. And then I was made a vice chairman of Burson Marsteller. You've heard of him. I hated it.
PR.
Yeah, well, no, but that's not what they wanted me for.
What did they want you for?
They wanted me to get business. But, as I learned quickly, just because I know all these CEOs, they're not the ones that necessarily make the PR decisions. And why should a CEO who knows me think, well, Ron did a great job of running the partnership, but what does he know about public relations? So I left there and I went to another one, which was called Diefenbach Elkins. It was sort of the same thing, but it was a branding company. You've been in this business. It was a branding company. And, I've gone from this giant office and all these things to this little hovel, but it was private, and I was supposed to help them, again, get business. So I put up with that about a year or two, and I left. And then I decided to become an entrepreneur. We were in the process of moving here at that time. It was a terrible adjustment, from going to this office. When I was at the partnership, I had a car and a driver. From doing all those things to becoming a humble citizen again. But once you adjust, you're so much better off being at home and working out of your office and other stuff. But it took a good year and a half to adjust. And then I tried a series of ventures. Several failed. And I met a friend who's now my business partner who ran an ad in the paper. He's a Russian. He'd immigrated here when he was 11, saying he was looking for somebody that knew something about chambers of commerce and trade associations. I didn't answer the ad for 3 weeks. And I thought, it was in the Wall Street Journal. I thought, what does it matter? I called. He said, let's get together at the Four Seasons. I said, great. I go to the Four Seasons restaurant. He goes to the Four Seasons hotel. It's a 2-hour problem. He calls my house, and June tells him, I think he's at the Four Seasons restaurant. He then calls me, and I go over to the hotel. And to make a long story short, we started b2bstreet.com, a name we paid a lot for and we still own. And basically what it was is you signed up Chambers of Commerce and Trade Association. They had, their members had excess inventory. they would put it online with b2bstreet.com through the Chamber of the Trade Association. We shared the revenue we got from them with the chambers, and we took revenue. It was a great idea, I think. You know, this was 1999, 2000, and I think you remember what happened then. We had 15 employees, we raised money, and then it all crashed. I went on a corporate board and then worked for them about 6 months at the same time. Igor Klebanov, my partner, he stuck it out. It went from 15 to 14 to 13. It got to him, and he finally closed it down. So that was that venture. I then wrote the book, Fallen Giant, and then Igor had an idea. He was very successful in business. I mean, he was summa cum laude from Harvard. He worked for McKinsey in Russia. I mean, he went to the London School of Economics, which I did too at one point. So we have some similarities, but really smart and great with numbers, which I'm not. He had a good job with GE and so forth. He wanted to be his own boss, so he quit. His first idea was that we would start a placement firm, which is back at the thing I didn't like, you know, headhunting firm, which we did with another partner who was relocated in France. And Igor's idea was he had been with these companies, so he knew where you could find the people. And we did some business, but the trouble is, you know, they're still going to go to who are the great headhunting firms. Can't think of them right now, but you know, the big firms. So, and I didn't like the job, so we got out of that. And then about 3 years ago, Igor, who's determined to be an entrepreneur, I don't know how he managed it financially all this time. And he's such a terrific guy, because I had invested $400,000 of AIG stock in B2B. One day we had lunch, and he handed me a $20,000 check. And he's not working, so he's really a decent guy. And part of the reason was we hired a third Russian to work for the company, and then he came to me and tried to take the company away from Igor. I got rid of him promptly, and Igor did too, and that was the end of that, and I don't ever know what happened to him. But Igor kept trying. We looked for companies. We tried and we tried. Do you need that close? No. He finally did it. He raised $500,000 from 25 investors, big guys, hedge fund investors and so forth. He's the CEO. I'm the executive advisor. It's called, anyway, it'll come to me in a minute. It's a big website. And his job now, he's been at it about 7 months, is to find companies that they want to buy. Then the CEOs that are interested, who are all very wealthy people, they will put up the money. And then he's to run the company. And, you know, I'm to help him go on the board and so forth. So that venture, writing a book, and this venture are the three things I do now.
That's great.
I'm the executive producer of a movie.
That's excellent.
Yeah, and we just changed the name.
To Down the Rabbit Hole?
Well, that's the production company, but we changed the name. It was about people who in 2008, you know, their jobs went to hell. We've now changed the name to 7 Americans, and it's about Americans from all walks of life, failures and success, like one of the examples, those 2 guys in San Antonio whose mother, you know, washed windows and mopped homes to get them ahead. One of them is now in Obama's cabinet. The other went to Harvard Law and is a great lawyer. So there's no speaking. We're not in the movie. We try to tell the lives of these people, some of who are struggling immensely. I mean, we have examples of the young person just out of college, well-educated, can't get a job or gets a second-rate job. We have examples of the person who is near retirement in his 50s, and he gets fired because companies are pretty ruthless these days, you know. They figure they can, he was making $500,000 a year. They figure they can hire somebody for $150,000 a year to do the same job. He's got a family. We have examples of retirement people. They've retired. They had their pension, they had everything. But after 2008, you know, it got wiped out. So I think it's going to be a good movie. That's what keeps me busy now. And the name of the company I couldn't think of that Igor and I have is Gladstone Capital.
Okay,
and
great.
It does have a very nice website.
That's great. Wow. So, given your illustrious career, what advice might you have for current students today? You alluded to a little bit of it earlier.
Yeah, probably redundant when they've heard. I really believe, and I believed at the time, you have to find what you wanted to do. I never heard of an insurance association or any of that stuff. What I wanted to do when I got out of college, I wanted to be a theologian. I guess I read Dietrich Bonhoeffer and a couple of people like that. I wanted to be a senator. I wanted to be president. I wanted to be a writer. The closest I came to being a senator and president was running the New York City Partnership, where I interacted with governors and mayors and all that. You know, I've read Bonhoeffer and I've read other theologians, and I have written some books. Beside that one, there was a book that sold very well that I wrote for the Council on Foreign Relations in 1981 called Beyond Industrialization, Ascendancy of the Global Service Economy. And that was back when people like Felix wrote and said, what are services? Those are people that flip burgers and such. Now people understand services are very important. There's trade laws governing it and everything else. So that's what I did.
Well, great. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today, and thanks for all you do to help the world, and all the interesting things that you've done have been really great to hear about. So hope you have it. Yeah.
I should tell you one more thing. If
Sure.
I were a student, I'd try to do what I want to do, but serendipity plays so much, like the guy calling from the chamber, like me sitting next to the guy on the plane and he says there's a good job opening, like me answering an ad in the Wall Street Journal. And the other piece of advice I would give was, I just want to do what I enjoy doing. I mean, you know, I was the highest paid graduate, along with Jerry de St. Pierre, who I don't know if you interviewed or not, at SAIS, and I made a big $10,000 a year, which back then was a lot of money. Until I was about 40 years old, it didn't occur to me, you know, if I don't get some money, I mean real money, you know, I'm going to be sort of slaving and have a tough time all my life. And that's when I really started focusing on making money. And it is important. I mean, I wasn't an investment banker, but it gives you the chance to acquire the art and to do things you love to do.
Well, great. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.